All right, hello, welcome back to Unqualified Analysis, the only show with I don't know what even is saying anymore. I'm not really sure this show has a slogan, but either way, it's Unqualified Analysis. I'm your host, Caleb Verzak. You can follow me on Twitter at Caleb Verzak. Still not on Threads, probably won't get on Threads. Just don't feel like it, so I'm just simply not gonna do it. But hey, we got a good show for you today. We are moving down south with the division previews, starting off with the AFC South. Then later in the day for me, next week for y'all, we'll be talking about the NFC South. Just getting a little extra work in before I take a vacation up to a national park and hike for about a week or so. Should be a fun time, but need to get ahead on work. So it's going to be a busy Monday, July 17th. For whoever is curious about out there. But yeah, today we've got some headlines for you. Then we're getting into the AFC South next week. No headlines because I'm pre-recording it. And we're getting to the NFC South. AFC, NFC, you get it. Anyways, this is going to be a long episode if I don't get out of the intro now. So let's just get straight into the headlines of the week from around the sporting world. Let's go. Yup, sipping on my second cup of coffee for the day. I'm gonna have to piss real bad at some point in this podcast here, but we're just gonna keep it moving. We're gonna keep it moving. If you see the camera starting to bounce a little bit, it's probably because my leg is bouncing because I gotta piss like a racehorse, but this is the decision I've made. This is the bed I've made. I'm going to have to sleep in it, except for no sleeping today. It's a work day. Either way, let's get into the headlines. First and foremost, just because, well, it's fresh on my mind now. Just happened a day or two ago. The Jets will be on Hard Knocks. This is confirmed now. The league said you may not like this, but suck it up. You're going to do it anyways. So come on in here. We are doing Hard Knocks in New York with the Jets, not the Giants, because, I think first-year head coaches, well, actually, no, that doesn't even make sense in that kind. Just forget I said anything about that. I'm a little bit scatterbrained today. But the Jets will have Hard Knocks, and I am looking forward to seeing all of the close-ups of Aaron Rodgers. He's probably going to be very calculated, very careful about what he says on those microphones to NFL Films, but I can only hope that we get a full in-depth interview on the many insane things that he believes. I mean, I'm talking from aligning chakras to going out to experience the plant medicine in ayahuasca, wherever he does that, probably out in like Napa, California or something like that. I'm looking forward to hearing about the darkness retreats. I'm looking forward to hearing about the many and varied conspiracies that this man believes, because I will maintain, and again, this is not something I thought of specifically on my own, but it was brought to my attention when he first went to the New York Jets, that he may believe some controversial things about 9/11, and I just want to, this is a big, what's the word, instant gratification move for me. I want to hear about it on a Hard Knocks, but what I really want to hear about it is on the day of 9/11, when they're playing a home game, the post-game presser, I'm trying to think whether it would be more chaotic if they won or if they lost. And I do think it would be more inclined to happen if they won. So, yeah, on 9/11, after a win versus, I think the Chiefs are coming to town. So, good luck. Good luck with that one. But, yeah, if he gets into that post-game interview, they're asking him questions about, how do you feel on this day, 9/11? And he's like, it was a great tragedy. It's something that we have to celebrate every year. We got to remember this so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, or whatever he says. The government should be ashamed of this. Sorry? Could you care to elaborate on that last point? And then we're off and running at that point. I mean, this could be an all-time press conference season for Aaron Rodgers, just because he's been used to the Green Bay media all this time. The New York media, they are a little bit more voracious in trying to get their stories, and there's also like a bajillion of them. It's a giant city. It's a media capital of the world, and this is a long. I'm not breaking any news here. This is a long storied history of New York media being very aggressive to get what they want, very critical when things aren't going well. This should just be a fun press conference season for Aaron Rodgers. But as far as the Hard Knocks goes, this could be. I mean, Hard Knocks kind of stinks. Well, let's call it what it is. It's not very good, but maybe if they get some, Aaron Rodgers putting crystals in people's lockers, there's a drama storyline with, I almost said Zach Wilson. He's not a wide receiver. Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers having some friction as far as the chemistry is concerned. Can't quite get it lined up on the field, get the timing quite right. Garrett Wilson comes in, has an interview, and just says, Aaron keeps telling me I have to align my chakras. I don't know what that means. He just keeps telling it to me and gets angry when I don't understand. I just don't get it. We could get some fun moments like that. I feel like the Jets are right for that sort of thing. Also, lest we forget, Sauce Gardner. He's a fantastic personality, walking quote, and pretty much undisputably after his rookie year, a top 5 corner in the entire league at the ripe old age of 23 or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunities for the Jets to have a fun trip on the Hard Knocks train here, but I won't be watching. Let's be honest here. I do pay for Max. That's an entirely too big bill every month, but it's less than $20 a month, so I can't complain too much. I just, I'm not going to use it. Not going to use it for this specifically. I probably won't use it at all because I don't watch enough stuff on there anyways. But yeah, should be a fun time for those who partake in the Hard Knocks. So let's get on to the next headline here, because if I don't get through these quickly, this will be a 2-hour episode. These, you know how these division previews go. If you've been around here for long enough, I mean, if I'm not careful about reining in the time here, this could last forever. So let's move on to different headline here. Former head coach of Aaron Rodgers. How about that for a segue? Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, Robert Saleh, current head coach of Aaron Rodgers. How about that? And Mike McDaniel. They were known as get this, the Piss Boys with the Texans. That's per Jason Hirschhorn of Acme Packing Co., who I can only assume is based in Green Bay or something like that. I don't know, man. That Acme Packing Co., I did not know that they had a journalism wing. I thought they were just totally into the packing game, but I digress on that front. Now I'm literally only going to call it. Let me go over the names again. Matt LaFleur, head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Kyle Shanahan, head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. Robert Saleh, head coach of the New York Jets. And Mike McDaniel, head coach of the Miami Dolphins. They were known as the Piss Boys when they were with the Texans, and now I will know them as nothing else from here on out. Those are the Piss Boys. I mean, like it or not, I heard the nickname. I love the nickname. So now you are just part of the Piss Boys. Kyle Shanahan, Piss Boy. Mike McDaniel, Piss Boy. Robert Saleh, probably wouldn't call it to his face because he's a scary man, but Piss Boy. Matt LaFleur, Piss Boy. I mean, that's one. Some terms of Piss Boy are going to be used more derogatorily than others. Like Matt LaFleur, lot of room for slandering there using the term Piss Boys, but it's going to be a term of endearment. Let's not get it twisted here. I love the nickname so much, and yeah, that's just what they're called now. They are the Piss Boys, the hottest boy band this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Really struggled to come up with a body of water there, but as I said before, we got to keep this thing moving. Up next, Alvin Kamara has pleaded no contest to misdemeanor assault charges, clearing the way for NFL discipline. This is basically what we've been waiting on this whole time. This is a situation that's been percolating for, I think over 2 years now. I think this was an incident that occurred in 2021, and we're in 2023 now. So I mean, the legal issue's just been kind of percolating, stemming from an alleged assault in Las Vegas, I think at the Pro Bowl or something like that, where it's I believe it is alleged that Alvin Kamara beat the hell out of somebody. Could be wrong on that. I said allegedly. Don't come suing me. I don't have any money anyways. So, yeah, what this basically means, though, what the important part of this, like I said, clearing the way for NFL discipline. The NFL tends to not get involved with these sorts of things before the legal matter is resolved. We saw it with Deshaun Watson. Didn't see it with Ray Rice, but that the video was an exacerbating circumstance there. Usually in a legal situation, the NFL lets the law play out before they come in and hand down their discipline. Now that the legal issue is settled, the investigation can come to some sort of culmination for the NFL side of things. It could lead to just a fine, could lead to a suspension. We won't know until the NFL hands it down. They have been known to go a little bit harder than you would expect given legal rulings in the past, so we're just gonna have to wait and find out. But Alvin Kamara is now kind of open to suspension. It's not like official, but the NFL does generally wait until the legal issues are resolved before handing down whatever penalty they decide to do. So that's something to keep an eye on over the next couple weeks. Will that affect this season? Will that affect next season? We won't know until they actually hand down the ruling here. I'm sure we'll get an update on that before training camp starts, so keep an eye on that for the next couple weeks or so. Yeah, already talked about that. I figured I didn't have a headline down here, but yeah, Jets are in Hard Knocks. Did not want to be there, but you know what? It should still be fun if you're into that sort of thing. I am not, but if you're into that, knock yourself out, I suppose. All right, what we got now? Yes, LeBron James announcing to the shock and surprise of everyone that he's returning for a 21st season, and he did so on the ESPYs. And yeah, he saw a spotlight, he saw he was in it, and just could not help but just try to snatch that himself. Just give it to me. I want all the attention. This is mine now. I want the attention so bad. Just give it to me. Just give it to me. I'm coming back for a 21st season. This night should be about me. It's about no one else. It's not about DeMar Hamlin or the Bills training staff earning an award. No, this is about me. 21st season, baby. I'm the GOAT. Let's go. I don't really have any strong opinions about this, quite honestly. This is just something. It seemed like news. Also, it's, one of the more LeBron things of all time. I don't necessarily. Here's the thing. It may sound like I don't like LeBron. That's not true at all. He is one of the, as far as like NBA players go, he is the player that got me into the NBA. He is so spectacular as a younger player that it was really one of those things, especially when he went to the Miami Heat. It was just scintillating, enthralling television. You couldn't get it off your TV on Sports Center or any of the shows that I was watching on ESPN at the time. I mean, it's one of those formative parts of my childhood, one of the things that made me love sports as a kid. So I love LeBron James for that, but as his career has gone on, as I've seen him more in the spotlight, me and just about everyone else has noticed that he loves attention so much, and it is a drug that he just keeps on coming back to, and it's hilarious. This is the most LeBron move of all time on the night of the ESPYs. All these other people getting recognized, but you know what? I'm coming back for a 21st season, baby. Give me that spotlight. It's mine now. Give it to me. Not sure it actually worked out that way, but I think in LeBron's mind, it kind of worked out that way. So, also, this isn't really news. We kind of figured, it's been no secret that I think LeBron James wants to play with his son at the NBA level, or at the very least wants to be in the league at the same time as his son, so maybe they can play against each other. He's not retiring before Bronny comes into the draft, I don't think. This kind of sucks for Bronny James, man, because I'm not sure right now he's really NBA ready. Maybe he goes to USC and absolutely dominates, surprises some people. But as far as his talent grade is concerned, yes, he's a very good college prospect right now. But if you're just looking at him, I'm not sure he's a guy that you're expecting to be a one and done just based on the talent. I think among the college circles, he seems to be a guy that should stay in college for 2, maybe 3 years to kind of develop a little bit more before he goes and tries the NBA. I'm not sure that's how it's going to play out, just because he's been put under so much pressure to be a one and done and play with his father at the next level. And LeBron James, that falls pretty much squarely on his shoulders just by putting it out there and being, I don't know about vocal, but not really hiding his want to play with his son. It could end up hurting his son in the end of the day, but we won't know until it happens. For right now, hey, LeBron James back for a 21st season, probably a 22nd season. Is going to stretch it to like 25 seasons if his son stays in college for 3 years, though. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that right now. But yeah, I've already spent too much time on this story, so let's just keep it moving. Sticking with the Jets now. Big time Jets week. They officially reached terms with Quinnen Williams on a 4-year, $96 million contract extension that I believe makes him one of, if not the highest paid defensive tackles on annual value in the entire league. It's $24 million a year. Big time paycheck there for the former number 3 overall pick, top 5 pick back when he was drafted. That's for sure. One of the more dominant defensive tackles in the entire league. Definitely a top 5 defensive tackle right now. He has been nothing short of spectacular since he joined the Jets. And fun fact, he's the first round pick to re-sign with the Jets after his rookie deal. Since I believe Muhammad Wilkerson like 8 years ago, something like 8 to 10 years ago. I mean, it's been a long time of just absolutely sucking at drafting or trading away their good players before it's extension time. Like Jamal Adams, that's what happened with him. I think he's kind of been... I don't know, because he's a good player. He's a good player, but he's definitely more of a linebacker than a safety. He's not a coverage safety, I'll put it to you that way. He's more of a box safety. He plays a very good strong safety, maybe not the best free safety in the world. Certainly not a guy that you want to pay an exorbitant value to, in my opinion. But, I mean, outside of that, they just have not hit on their top picks in quite some time. So, Joe Douglas, at least doing an okay job. I mean, he's put together a loaded roster, so you got to give him that credit. Never could quite evaluate a QB properly, but it doesn't matter if you trade for one. So, hey, Jets got something going on down there. Quinnen Williams is going to be around to see how it all turns out. Good for them for getting that deal done. Let's go to the college ranks real quick, shall we? Tennessee gets an $8 million fine. No bowl ban, though, for impermissible benefits, as my nose itches like a son of a bitch. Impermissible benefits handed out to players during the Jeremy Pruitt tenure. My thoughts on this: one, totally different regime now. Josh Heupel's in there. I think there's basically no returning members from that Jeremy Pruitt staff that are still around on the Tennessee coaching staff. Man, this nose, it just keeps itching something fierce, and I don't enjoy it. Gotta make sure this is a vigorous itching, so I don't have to go back and do that again. But yes, like I was saying, I don't think anyone from the Jeremy Pruitt staff is still on the Tennessee coaching staff right now. I've not checked that, so I mean, feel free to fact check that for me and then yell at me on Twitter. Need the engagement over there. But outside of that, this, like I said, new coaching staff, which I said 3 times now. Did it actually get anyone hurt? Did these moves actually lead to winning football? No and no. Then who cares? Truly, I don't care. Some people were upset that there was no bowl ban on this one. It's a different regime. The teams were bad every year that Jeremy Pruitt was there. They get all the talent in the world. Who doesn't remember the Jarrett Garantano era in Knoxville? Maybe it's just because I'm in the Tennessee region, but I certainly remember, and I remember the fans being abjectly miserable during that entire time. So that's pretty indicative of what the Jeremy Pruitt era in Knoxville was as well. I mean, get some good talent in there, but never quite good enough to get you a winning team, especially in the SEC East, which is objectively the less sort of what's the word? The less strong of the two divisions in the SEC. I can't believe it took me that long to figure out what I was trying to say there, but you think that if you get all that talent in there, just any semblance of good coaching would get you to the next level, get you competing with the Kirby Smarts of the world up there at the top. But it didn't turn out that way, and that's when all these infractions happened. So why punish the next regime for the previous regime's mistakes? Go ahead, slap Tennessee with a big old fine to make it look good on paper, and then just keep it moving. We all know the NCAA is a joke anyways, so this isn't necessarily something that they needed to go hard and throw the book at him, and I don't necessarily support the NCAA doing that anyways anymore. Also, it's a bunch of benefits that, sure, some of them were coming from the coaching staff, so they still would not be legal now. But in an era of NIL, things have changed as far as impermissible benefits go. Things that were impermissible before are publicly applauded now for being progressive and forward-looking. So I don't necessarily care about this. I don't think you should necessarily care about this too, but I'm not here to legislate what you think. That's just my 2 cents in the matter. We got to keep this thing going though, because I've spent 20 minutes on headlines when I have a whole division to preview. Good time management. This is going to be a 2-hour episode, folks. Up next, we got Joe Mixon taking a pay cut to stick around with the Bengals. Not going to spend too much time on this, but just a refresher, Joe Mixon was accused of, I think is like menacing pretty much, got in the face of a girl. It's domestic stuff. I mean, kind of echoing, definitely not the same thing as what we heard back in his college days, but echoing the sentiments of that video that surfaced back in college that got him suspended for an entire year when he punched out a sorority girl in some public place on camera. Maybe not the exact same situation as Ray Rice, but very reminiscent of the Ray Rice situation. That dropped him out of the first. He probably would have been a late first round pick in his rookie season in that draft if he would have just stayed on the straight and narrow. But that whole suspension for an entire year, that video, that the optics of that, the NFL's lingering domestic violence sort of reputation that they have hanging over their heads, scared a lot of teams away, dropped them down into the 3rd or 4th round. And then he has this situation pop up once again where seems like he's got some domestic violence issues against women. Allegedly. That seems to be what the direction of this whole thing was. I think he smashed up property or whatnot. Charges were dropped initially, but that was so the police could gather more evidence. I think they were refiled later, so it's still a pending legal matter. I guess, sticking with the theme from earlier, with Alvin Kamara, maybe this is a situation where the Bengals are letting the whole legal thing play out before they make any rash decisions. But yeah, this is a sticky wicket. It's once again Cincy demonstrating that cost savings trumps all else. Disappointed but not surprised. That's basically the way I would put this right now. He's taking like half a pay cut with incentives to kind of bump him back up to where he was. It's good financially for the team. Maybe morally, when has an NFL team truly cared about morals? But doesn't look great among your female fan base, I would imagine. But I'm not sure he's going to be there after this season because you don't really want to pay running backs at this point anyways. And I think they just drafted somebody as well. And they lost Samaje Perine in free agency, so they kind of needed him around anyways. Maybe not a harmonious union, but it's a union that I suppose needed to happen from a team construction standpoint. I hate seeing guys like that on rosters. And maybe I'm showing my cards a little bit too much. Let the legal situation play out, and then we'll revisit this some other time. We got to keep it moving, though. Couple quick ones to hit here. Jags tight end Evan Ingram agrees to a 3-year extension with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for him to agree with an extension with somebody else. But once again, I digress on that front. I think it's like 3 years, 41 and some sort of change million. As far as total value is concerned, I did not catch the guarantees on that. Like every other deal signed in free agency this year, I would imagine that it's going to be one of those things where the first 2 years are guaranteed, and then after that, we'll see what happens for the 3rd year, whether it's, I assume it's going to be a team option. There's not really a whole lot of player options in the NFL. Not quite like the NBA on that, but let's stay on target here. Haven't seen a whole lot of franchise tag deals thus far. If we did, we saw him early on in this process. But Evan Ingram, stripping that franchise tag down, getting a fresh new deal. Good for him. Tony Pollard, I believe the deadline is today as I'm recording this, or sometime in the near future. They're not expected to get a deal done. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, definitely not expected to get a deal done right now. The running backs are where the spotlight is right now for the franchise tag extensions, and it does not look like it's going to happen. So this could get very interesting as far as holdouts go. I mean, Tony Pollard's already signed. He's going to be there. But I'm talking specifically about Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley. This could get very uncomfortable for those teams. And if Josh Jacobs doesn't play for the Raiders, I'm here to tell you they will be terrible. Just awful. God awful. I do not see them being very good if they can't get that done. I don't see them being very good if they do get the Josh Jacobs deal done, but I certainly don't see them being very good if they can't get that done. But let's keep it moving here. We got DeAndre Hopkins expected to sign with the Tennessee Titans on a 2-year, I believe it's $26 million deal, something like that. I think it's like $12 million in the first year, almost 15. In the second year, there might be an option on that second year from the team perspective, just based on how the first year goes. Well, I, again, didn't look up a whole lot of information. I'm working. I got stuff to do. All I saw was the headline, jotted it down on the headlines section of my notes app, and here we are now. But Tennessee getting pretty much step in the door, number one wide receiver. Does this necessarily make them better? I mean, I suppose on paper it could help out. It's a guy that can make some plays down the field when he is healthy. The question is, can he stay healthy? But we won't know that until we're on the field. DeAndre Hopkins, big-time addition, though, at least from a monetary perspective. It's an addition they could afford to. Shows that new GM, Rand Carthon, our favorite smuggler in the Star Wars universe, is serious about trying to win this year. They just drafted a QB. Okay, we'll talk about this in just a second because, by God, we're about to talk about the AFC South. But with Mike Vrabel in place, could be a move that puts them over the top and puts them right near the top of the AFC South once again this year. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Kind of a good segue, though, as we're getting at the end of these headlines right now to get into the AFC South. But DeAndre Hopkins could add some juice on that offense. It all kind of comes down to what Ryan Tannehill is going to do and whether we see any Will Levis this season. If we see Will Levis, things have gone very awry. I'll just put it to you that way. But with that, we have gone just about 30 minutes into this podcast and not talked once about the subject of the episode, the AFC South. So, without further ado, without further bloviating, let's get into the AFC South preview. Let's crack this thing open. So far, so good. Have not had to piss my pants just yet, but now that I'm thinking about it, could be right around the corner, so we'll just have to see how this thing goes. Kicking off the AFC South, we're doing this just like I've done every other division thus far. We're just going down last year's standings from best to worst, and then I'm going to tell you who I think is going to win this thing overall. So let's get into it right now, starting with the division winner last year, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Notably, they traded for Calvin Ridley coming off his gambling suspension to create one epic group of weapons for Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson to use at their disposal. We'll talk about that when we get to the personnel, but just know they have a loaded receiving core right now, and they just extended Evan Ingram to keep him in town for quite some time. So pretty much everyone on that roster is locked up for multiple years after this one. So it should be a fun offense for the foreseeable future down there in Jacksonville. They're the reigning division champion, like I said, and they did improve in certain areas. Couple questions, though, here at offensive line and secondary. Those will be areas to watch after losing some key pieces there. Cam Robinson suspended for, I believe, the first 6 games of the season on the offensive line for PEDs. Outside of that, on the defensive side of the ball, they lose their number one corner, Shaquille Griffin. That's the one I was thinking of. They lost him this offseason, and he just got picked up by somebody. Didn't really have a giant market, surprisingly enough, but They didn't really add in the secondary either, and it wasn't a secondary that I would look at in all last season. So that's one area of the defense I'm a little bit worried about. The front seven's still very solid, though, so this could be a very, very good team when it's all said and done. Like I said, second year of Doug Peterson in that offense. Trevor Lawrence learning from a real offensive coach in the 21st century. What a novel concept for him, and it paid off real well last season. Had some ups and downs, but understandable for a second-year quarterback who didn't really have any sort of structure in his first year to fall back on. This time around with Calvin Ridley, they got a legit number one wide receiver in there. All the guys they already had on the roster make it an even more formidable wide receiver group. You got a very good offensive mind in Doug Peterson calling the plays and developing this offense. Continuity there, being the head coach as well. He's not going to get hired away by somebody else. The system will be the same no matter what every single year that Peterson is there. With an offseason in that system, I think Trevor Lawrence has an opportunity to make a really big leap this year, and he's got the weapons to do it. This offense could very easily be a top 10 offense right out of the gate. I mean, you got everything you want. The question is, how will the offensive line hold up? And if the offensive line doesn't hold up, how does Doug Peterson work around it so he doesn't get his quarterback absolutely killed in the passing game? I would imagine there's a strong running presence in there, but danced around it enough, man. Let's just look at the personnel for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm pretty high on what they've got coming in. Let's start off with the draft this year. In the first round, they draft offensive tackle Anton Harrison, who will probably be asked to step in right away with that offensive line situation that I was just talking about. Draft Brenton Strange in the second round at tight end. I'm unfamiliar with Brenton Strange's work. We'll just put it that way. And right now, I'm looking at this, and I cannot believe that he was drafted in the second round. I mean, that is wild. That is wild. Neither here nor there. Second round for Brenton Strange. That's not a guy I heard about at all going into the draft, so we'll have to see how that one works out. He didn't get brought in to be a receiver, though. They've already got the receiving tight end in Evan Ingram, and this is a theme we're seeing across the league right now, where teams are bringing in more of a blocking tight end to let their receiving tight end just basically be another wide receiver. Next week, we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. Later today, I'm going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons. But this is kind of what they did, bringing in Jonnu Smith. It's one of those moves where you free up your athletic freight to just go do what he does, catch jump balls, create separation, just be an absolute matchup nightmare for the defense. That's kind of what the Jaguars did here with Brenton Strange. Bring in Tank Bigsby. That's like the bajillionth year in a row that the GM for the Jaguars, whose name escapes me right now, has drafted a running back. He'll probably step in and play some good rotational snaps for them. They bring in Ventrell Miller in the fourth round, and then from there we're just going down the list. Unless it's a running back there in the later rounds, you just got no idea what you're getting from those mid to late round picks. But that's the key contributors they drafted this year, just to on the surface look at it. Outside of that, what did they do in free agency? Well, I'm glad you asked. They lose Jawan Taylor to the Chiefs again, underpinning that offensive line situation that was good last year but could very easily kind of devolve this year. Just got to get this hair off of my screen. That's not information y'all needed, but just keeping you updated on how life is going. They lose Arden Key in the division to the Tennessee Titans. Retain Andrew Wingard on a 3-year deal, a guy that maybe not the greatest safety in the world. White Lightning out there, though, and you know what? A guy that they needed to keep around because they already lost Shaquille Griffin, and they hadn't really brought in a whole lot outside of that. So there was questions there. You needed a guy to maintain the stability. Andrew Wingard gets a 3-year deal based on that. They lose Chris Manhertz, the guy that probably played more of the blocking tight end role last year. They lose him to Denver this offseason on a 2-year deal. Shaquille Griffin, like I said, signed a 1-year deal in the division that I did not understand quite frankly initially. In the division, going to the Houston Texans on a 1-year deal, augmenting that secondary group, which is looking pretty solid after what they did this offseason. We'll talk about them in just a few minutes here. Outside of that, they lose Marvin Jones to Detroit, which you can sustain that when you've got the receiving core they did. Also adding Calvin Ridley does not hurt on that side of things as well. Retained Adam Gotsis on the defensive side. Retained Trey Herndon at cornerback, a guy that they needed. Actually upgrade at kicker. They signed Brandon McManus, who got cut from the Denver Broncos this past season. Big time leg, very good very good kicker historically in the league. He should really help out for Jacksonville on the special teams side of things. They add Josh Wells from the Tampa Bay offensive line at right tackle, 32-year-old tackle. We'll see. They didn't exactly have an explosive offensive line last year. I'll just put it to them that way. Add Dearness Johnson at running back, which, by the way, you got Tank Bigsby playing the number 3, Dearness Johnson at number 2, Travis Etienne at number 1. My goodness, they have got a backfield right now. So if nothing else, run blocking, historically much easier than pass blocking for an offensive line. If all goes to shit, that run game is going to feature prominently, I promise you that right now. Outside of that, we're kind of getting into the nitty gritty here as far as the free agents are concerned. So I'll stop it there. They lose tight end Dan Arnold. How about that? That's, it is what it is there. That's what they did in free agency. That all coalesces together into this depth chart right now. Obviously on offense, you got quarterback Trevor Lawrence coming back in. No news there. Could have a big time leap this year with what they've got what he's got at his disposal. Right now, Dearness Johnson is listed at the number 3 on the depth chart. I do not expect that to stay that way. I think you'll probably jump Jermichael Hasty, jump Tank Bigsby all the way up at 2. ESPN's got him as the 4th running back on the roster right now. I don't see that happening. He's a very good back. He was just buried behind Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt with the Cleveland Browns over the last several years. So that is to say, though, they have a very, very deep backfield there. Travis Etienne being the 1, Tank Bigsby slated as the number 2 right now. Jermichael Hasty is the number 3, who I'm not even sure will be with the team next year if Dearness Johnson works out. Loaded backfield right now. That's a theme you're going to see across the league because that is just the time it is to be a running back. Part of why the running back market is so hard to get money in right now, but a different subject for a different time. Wide receiver wise, Calvin Ridley. I'm starting to think ESPN doesn't actually know what the depth chart is going to look like. 'Cause Calvin Ridley is slated as the number 2. He's the number 1 wide receiver on this thing. Let's not get this thing twisted. Also got Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, who they signed in last year's offseason. Jamal Agnew playing a 4th string role there. Speed guy, returner that they have back there, provides a good gadget role. And of course, Evan Ingram at tight end. I mean, really just the 4 of Ridley, Kirk, Jones, and Ingram. As good of a top 4 receiving threats as you're going to find in the entire league in totality. You got a very good creative offensive mind in Doug Peterson to take advantage of it. It all comes down to what Trevor Lawrence does for how far this team is going to go and how the offensive line goes, because like I just said, Cam Robinson starting at left tackle, suspended for the first 6 games of the season. Anton Harrison, their 1st round pick, will be stepping into that role. Ben Barch, who I definitely have heard of before this, Luke Fortner at center, Brandon Scherf at right guard, and Walker Little at right tackle. Walker Little, I really only know about his Madden rating, and his Madden rating is like, I think, low 70s to high 60s. So that's basically gospel on how good of a player he is in Madden 23. Even taking that aside, though, this is not an offensive line that you can be super confident in going into the season. You counter that by running a bit more, adding more power looks to keep the defensive line on their heels a little bit more. This should be an interesting sort of coaching season for Doug Peterson as far as what they're going to do with the offensive line, because I'm not sure it is as strong as it was last year, especially with all that they lost. But excuse me. With that said, let's take a look at the defensive side of the ball, which I think as far as the strength of the team, obviously those receivers, that offense should be very high on the list. But the defense, as far as the front seven is concerned, no slouches either. Yes, they lost Arden Key, but they still got Foley Fatukasi in there, solid defensive lineman, Devon Hamilton, Roy Robertson Harris at that front three. Then he got Josh Allen, the defensive end, weak side linebacker, though, in this defense. Rushing the passer, you got Devin Lloyd as an inside linebacker, Foye Oluwakin as the right inside linebacker, who literally all he does is just produce tackles like an absolute machine. Monster Foye Oluwakin. Very, very good player there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And last year's number 1 overall pick, Travon Walker, really came on towards the end of last season, improved throughout the year. Could be in for a big-time season this time around, rushing opposite of Josh Allen. That front seven, probably the strength of their defense. Well, not probably, definitely the strength of their defense right now as far as this team is constructed. If they can get some pressure on the quarterback, they could really make the lives of their cornerbacks a little bit easier. Speaking of those cornerbacks, they got Darius Williams and Tyson Campbell as the leading corners this year coming in. Then you got Trey Herndon, Monteric Brown, who I've definitely heard of as the other corners behind them. Thin on the outside right now, and that's a concern for him. Got Rayshawn Jenkins coming in at strong safety, Andre Sisco at free safety. I want to say those are the same starters that they had last year. Sorry, the coffee is coming back up to me in a numerous amount of ways, so having a little bit of burping issues here, trying to hold it back. Just, again, keeping y'all updated on how this thing is going. Jamal Agnew returning kicks. Logan Cook, Hail State, punting and holding out there. Plays kicker Brandon McManus right now. I think also Logan Kick doing the kickoff, so Hail Damn State to Logan out there. Love seeing a former, a fellow alumni even, doing well at the next level. But that being said, sticking with the defense right now, that group of safeties probably is going to have to make up for not a lot. I don't want to besmirch the good name of the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary, but it's about as big of a concern for me as the offensive line on the other side right now. I mean, these Jacksonville Jaguars could be a very, very good team, but they got some holes that could really tank what they're trying to do this season. Luckily, they're in a fairly easy division in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, there's no gimmies in there as well. So secondary is a big concern for what I'm looking at. Andre Sisco and Rayshawn Jenkins did do a good job last year, but they're going to have to step up even more so this year if they want to continue the upward trajectory that they've had. So, looking at the ceiling for this team, I'm going to go with 11 wins. I don't see them making that jump, being a 12-13 win season. If for no other reason than that, it's the Jaguars, man. I can't just jump out on my soapbox and be like, hey, the Jaguars are going to be one of the best teams in the entire league, and the roster makes it easy for me to do that, right? Like I've said a couple times at this point, the offensive line's a concern for me. The secondary is a concern for me. They have a very strong front seven. They have a very strong group of weapons, both in the backfield and running out on routes. And they have a third-year quarterback who could be in line to make a big-time jump this year as far as production is concerned. So they got a lot of good pieces in place on offense. They got some good pieces in place on defense, but they have some undeniable concerns on both sides of the ball. For me, that equates to an 11-win season, especially in a division where Mike Vrabel's going to get at least one over on you. There's some interesting, difficult teams this year as far as how they're constructed to defend. Could very easily see them going 3-3 in the division, and then outside of the division, we'll see what happens from there. So 11 wins, that's my ceiling for them right now. The floor, even with those holes in the roster, like I was talking about, I still think 8 wins is the floor. I feel like they're not going to be, they could be bad. They could be, just about average, but I don't think they're going to be terrible this season. I think 8 wins as a floor is good. I don't think the weapons on offense, I'll put it to you this way. Even if the offensive line completely implodes this year, I feel like Doug Peterson is going to coach them into a position where they are a top half of the league offense, no matter what. They might have some down games, but on the whole, they're not going to be a terrible offense. And the secondary could be objectively bad on defense. No two ways about it. That front seven, I feel like, is explosive enough to get pressure and, get them some games here and there to where they're not going to be objectively bad. I don't think they're going to be going 7-10 this year. I'll put it to you that way, barring any unforeseen significant injuries at this point. I just don't see that happening. So my prediction for this year, 10-7. Seems like the number for them. I think it's the same record they had. Actually, 9-8 was the record they had last year. I think 10-7 is probably what they're looking at this year. Like I said, if all goes right, they could end up at 11-6, and at that point probably run away with this division. But it's the Jags, man. I have a hard time seeing that happen. They're going to drop some games here and there where you're just like, what the fuck was that? How did that even happen? But I think they, on the whole, are going to be a very good, very high ceiling sort of team this year. So 10-7, that's my prediction for the Jacksonville Jaguars. With that said, you already know what time it is, folks. It's time to take a break and go to the bathroom. I'll be right here in just a second, all right? Hold in there. You're not going to have to wait long because editing does exist. And all right, we are back. I have relieved myself. I have downed the last of my coffee, so the last three teams, we are raw dogging the vocal cords here, folks. Anyways, up next, now that we have gotten through the initial team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, let's get to the Titans. And you know what? They did sign DeAndre Hopkins. That being said, this roster kind of stinks. Not that good. I mean, they got not even really an okay offensive line. They didn't have a very good offensive line last year. All they did was lose people along that offensive line. They've got an aging running back superstar who plays a very physical style of play right now, and Derrick Henry, who's to say if this is the year where he no longer has that sort of production. He's been injured the last couple, so it feels like we're on the doorstep of that sort of thing happening. Without Mike Vrabel, this roster screams top 5 pick, quite frankly. And that's even with DeAndre Hopkins. This team is just simply not that good. With Mike Vrabel, though, and in a division that, like I said, kind of stinks outside of the Jacksonville Jaguars, this could very conceivably still be a team that competes for a division title, if you ask me. I mean, again, not a strong division, and he's a very, very good head coach. Could conceivably happen. Do I think they win a game if they made it to the playoffs? God, no. Like I said, this is not a very good roster. And when you get to playing other teams that are very well coached and more talented, generally that shows up pretty prominently at the playoff level. And especially with it in a do or die scenario where you either win or you go home, that other team is going to be ready to beat the hell out of you, quite frankly. So I don't see them winning a game if they get to the playoffs. I could always see Mike Vrabel putting together a hell of a game plan and making it close, though. I'll put it to you that way. There's no one in the AFC South that feels like a shoe-in to make the postseason, though. Even the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I just talked about, like I said, their floor is 8 wins for me. 8-9 doesn't get you to the playoffs. I don't think the division is that bad to where 8-9 wins you the division this year. So any one of these teams could miss the postseason. Any one of these teams could finish last in the division as far as I'm concerned. The Titans have the best head coach of the 4 teams, so I won't rule out a division title, quite frankly. I feel like that is still a possibility, but right now, they're going to cobble together a defense. I'll tell you that right now, and Jeffrey Simmons makes that very easily. On offense, though, they have got some work to do. The receivers aren't very good. Like I said, aging backfield back there, and you don't know what you have in Hassan Haskins. That's another guy who I think is in a bit of a legal situation right now. I don't know if he's suspended or what. That seemed like an interesting one there. Outside of that, though, let's just take a look at that personnel. We're dancing all around it with our dancing shoes on. Let's just get right into it. As far as the draft is concerned, they draft Peter Skoronski in the first round. He's going to be asked to play right away. Would have been asked to play anyways, but old Nicholas, little brother, a.k.a. Petite Frere, got popped for gambling in the facility, so he'll be out for 6 games. Did not gamble on the NFL, though, so not a career death sentence. Just, learning a new rule in a way that costs you a lot of money, basically. In the second round, they take Will Levis. If we see him at any point in this season, probably not a good sign for how the season is going for the Tennessee Titans, because that will mean Ryan Tannehill is either 1, injured, or 2, playing very badly and needed to be benched. So if you're a Titans fan, I think your biggest hope is that you don't see Will Levis throughout this season, and I'll just put it to you that way. Third round, and this is a guy that I forgot they even had on their team, but a sneaky, sneaky good pickup. Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. He was absolutely torching guys at the Senior Bowl. One of the best route runners out of the backfield in the entire draft this year. He's a guy that I think might not feature prominently because you still got Derrick Henry there. He's going to be the bell cow for the most part. But when Derrick Henry needs a rest, Tyjae Spears could be an explosive sort of backup option, a guy that can come and change the pace a little bit and get you some of those chunk yardages either out of the backfield as a receiver or in the running game. He's very shifty in that aspect as well. Good pickup in the third round there with Tyjae Spears. Then in the fifth round, Josh Wild, tight end out of Cincinnati, and we're getting into players that you've never heard of, so no need to even go over that sort of thing. Let's look at the free agency, what they did this year. They pick up Andre Dillard, who should bolster the offensive line a little bit. He was buried on that depth chart with the Philadelphia Eagles like we were talking about last week. So he could step in, could be very good. Hasn't gotten a whole lot of reps, though, so we'll see with a full-time role how he's looking over there. They're going to need him early in the season with Nicholas Petit-Frere being out with that gambling suspension. At guard, they lose Nate Davis to the Chicago Bears, a guy that the Bears kind of needed in the interior. And I would say Nate Davis is a guy that the Titans kind of needed on the interior too. That interior right now, not looking great as far as it's going right now. The Titans do, on the other side of the ball though, they bring in Arden Key. They lose DeMarcus Walker, so that's out of the question there. They lose David Long, too, as well. They bring in Azeez Al-Shaair, though, who is also kind of buried on that depth chart with the San Francisco 49ers. Very explosive player, very fast player. Just did not get a whole lot of opportunities playing behind Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. Probably the best duo of inside linebackers in the entire league right now. So he's going to step into a starting role with the Tennessee Titans as well. Bring in Luke Gifford from Dallas on a 2-year deal, linebacker. Sean Murphy-Bunting, they bring in from Tampa Bay. Good upgrade on the outside there. Lose Dennis Daly to the Cardinals. Bud Dupree to the Falcons. They didn't really necessarily want him back, though. Austin Hooper to the Raiders, and now we're just getting into the territory where it's not really a whole lot of explosive sort of contributors, if you will. Outside of Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, he's still in the top 3 of the wide receivers, which tells you just about all you need to know as far as the depth of the receiving core is concerned right now. But that's the free agency, and with that all comes together to this depth chart that I'm about to read out right now. Right now, Ryan Tannehill, of course, is the starter. Malik Willis is slated as the second-string quarterback, which again, I'm not sure ESPN really knows what they're talking about. Maybe Will Levis is doing so bad that Malik Willis is the second option there, but I don't know, man. I feel like we saw enough from Malik Willis to know that you don't necessarily need to trot him out in year 2 and ask him to do much of anything. It was that bad. It was that bad last year. He looked absolutely lost when he was playing in the game, so maybe Will Levis looks equally as lost. I don't expect Will Levis to stay at third string, though. I'll just put it to you that way and then just keep it moving. They do have Tyjae Spears as the second string running back right now, Hassan Haskins as the third, Derrick Henry being the number 1. Not really a stacked backfield, I would say, but it's a backfield that still could create some problems for some defenses. And again, run blocking easier than pass blocking, so it could be a strength of them going forward. If Derrick Henry is playing up to the level he's played at for his entire career, that won't be an issue. I can guarantee you of that right now. Wide receivers, they've got Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and Kyle Phillips slated at the third whenever I took this screenshot. Now that they got DeAndre Hopkins, he probably slates in as the number 1, Treylon Burks as the number 2, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine as the number 3, and then Kyle Phillips bumping down to the number 4 at that point. So, not the greatest receiving core. I think certainly a bottom half of the league receiving core, even adding DeAndre Hopkins in there. You hope for a big jump from Treylon Burks in year 2. No real guarantee of that, though, and he flashed last year at points, played well when he was out there, was injured, which kind of limited his explosive ability. They're going to need a big jump from Treylon Burks this year, though, if they want to get into any sort of competing mode with the offensive skill group that they've got right now. And, of course, they got Chika Okonkwo at the tight end, a name that you probably don't remember, but in last year's draft, he was the fastest tight end in the draft and showcased that speed all throughout last season in various spots. So he's stepping into that number one tight end role now that Austin Hooper is out of this team on a different team now. I think he was with Houston or something like that. But yeah, that's the weapons for you. Not the greatest group, probably a bottom half of the league group of weapons, but still, if you got good QB play and you got good running back play, a group that could get you some yards if you need them to, especially if DeAndre Hopkins can stay healthy. That adds an aspect that they simply did not have without him in there as far as explosive ability is concerned. On the offensive line, Andre Dillard slates in at that left tackle, big free agent signing. We'll have to see how he does. A guy that I think was playing offensive tackle right tackle rather for much of his career. We'll have to see how he slates in at that left tackle. That's going to be a big one. That kind of where the team hinges this year. Peter Skoronski, that first round pick. There was a question coming into the draft whether he would be a guard or a tackle. Right now in the depth chart, he is slated as the left guard, and I think probably a situation or a position that he could be very comfortable with stepping in and playing well right away. Aaron Brewer, who I believe is a returner from last year, he's at center. Got Daniel Brunskill, another returner from last year, at right guard, and Nicholas Petit-Frere slated as a starting right tackle, but like I said, suspended. So you may see Peter Skoronski bumping out to right tackle to start the season. If not, Jalen Duncan is currently the backup right tackle on the depth chart right now. So that's the right side of the offensive line is going to be the big issue for them with Nicholas Petit-Frere out there for the first 6 games. Will Peter Skoronski bump out there? Will they kind of piece it together their own way before then? We'll have to see, but as a full collection on offense, I mean, this screams middle of the road to me. I mean, it's not the greatest offense in the world. Yes, they upgraded at receiver. Talked about that already, though. This feels like an offense that very much hinges on whether Derrick Henry comes out there and is the Derrick Henry of old this year, which you just simply can't count on being a 30-year-old running back playing the physical style that Derrick Henry does. Yes, he is a superhuman, gigantic human being that can probably take the punishment that gets doled out to his body, but eventually, if Cam Newton, that's funny. If Cam Newton has taught us anything through his career, though, and how it ended, the hits catch up to everybody. That's really what it comes down to. You can be as big and strong as you want, but Father Time always wins. The cumulative punishment of the hits always catches up to you eventually. Could this be the year that Derrick Henry kind of slips on his production and his play level? I hope not, but I could certainly see that happening. You can't count on that being him being at the peak of his powers at this stage of his career anymore. But that's the offense. Let's look at the defense right now. Jeffrey Simmons, Tier Tart, Danico Autry on the front line there. Very solid front three. Then Harold Landry coming back off that ACL. What's he going to look like rushing the passer? He was very good the year before he tore his ACL. Missed all of last season with that ACL tear. I got inside linebacker Monty Rice stepping up into the gap that David Long left, heading down to Miami. They're going to be a key contributor on that Miami defense this season. What will Monty Rice do? Got like Luke Gifford as his backup there that we just talked about. I think they drafted in the 3rd round of this year's draft. Arden Key at the other side, outside linebacker, rushing opposite of Harold Landry. His performance will probably largely hinge on how Harold Landry looks coming off of that ACL tear. So we got some question marks there, but if you got Jeffrey Simmons up front, Danico Autry also, by the way, Hale State up there as well. Very good Mississippi State defensive line there at the front three. Plus what they've got, Azeez Al-Shaair stepping into that right inside linebacker role next to Monty Rice, who I think I forgot to mention, but still solid front seven. Jeffrey Simmons puts everyone in a good position to succeed, makes everyone else's job easier, especially on that linebacker spot, especially with Monty Rice, Azeez Al-Shaair stepping in. Should be a formidable front seven with Jeffrey Simmons being that linchpin in the middle, just getting paid. Did Jeffrey Simmons. Shout out to the boy. Hail damn state. Let's move on to the secondary right now. Got Roger McCreary, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Christian Fulton, Caleb Farley. Pretty solid secondary there as far as the cornerbacks are concerned. Fairly deep, fairly solid play. I mean, Sean Murphy-Bunting, he was I believe like a starting outside corner with the Buccaneers last year. And again, maybe this is a situation where ESPN just doesn't know what they're talking about. He's going to be a shoe-in outside corner, but Sean Murphy-Bunting currently slated as your third corner. Christian Fulton and Roger McCreary had, solid seasons last year. Played, struggled at times, but solid seasons. We also got Kevin Byard, perennial all-pro back there at free safety, and strong safety Amani Hooker, who played well in spurts last season. This is a solid defense here, and this is more than enough, ample resources for Mike Vrabel to cobble together one hell of a defense here. I think this defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. I think this team looks very similar to what it looked like last season, just physical, beating the hell out of you. They're games that when you watch them, you might want to cry at times because of how ugly it is, but at the end of the day, you get down to the fourth quarter and it's a 3-point game, either Titans leading or Titans just being behind. Mike Vrabel, with the style that he coaches and the style that he coaches on defense specifically, is going to keep you in a lot of games, I would imagine, specifically in a division that is not nearly as tough as any of the Eastern divisions, whether that be AFC or NFC. This is a much more gettable division than either of those. And I will just say, if the Titans were in either of those divisions, whether AFC East or NFC East, they would be very clearly the last place team in those divisions. And in the AFC South, who's to say? They may end up winning the whole thing if all falls in their favor. But with that said, I see the ceiling of this team being 9 wins. Even with the strengths on defense that I just talked about, the offense is so concerning to me with... I have a hard time seeing them being better than middle of the pack, and I could very easily see them being bottom of the middle of the pack at that with how they're playing. Ryan Tannehill, a perennial question mark, it feels like, a quarterback, really since he was back in Miami. He had like 1 or 2 good years to start his career with Tennessee that earned him a big extension, 4 years, like $80 million, something like that. Good, like mid-level quarterback extension as far as I'm concerned. But last year wasn't great for him, had a hard time staying on the field. This year, questions as to whether or not he'll be good. If he is good, they could still make a run at this thing, get up to 9 wins, but even with that, I have a hard time seeing them being better than middle of the pack next season, just based on the historical trends of Tennessee and how it's looked over there. Questions at receiver, will DeAndre Hopkins stay healthy? Will Chigakonkwo make a leap in year 2? I don't know. Too many questions for me to say that their ceiling is anything more than 9 wins, though. And as a floor, like I said, this roster is not that good outside of the defense and what Mike Vrabel could do with that defense. I could very easily see them getting 5 wins this year. I mean, if Derrick Henry isn't good, I don't think Tyjae Spears is a bell cow you want to be leaning on. I think Derrick Henry, just by the dynamics of interpersonal relations and keeping a team from revolting, is going to have to take a lot of snaps this year, just as being a leader of the team. What he means to that locker room. You can't screw the guy, so he's probably going to be starting for the duration of this season unless he really just falls off a cliff this year with his play. But if he's not as good as he has been, if he's not breaking off those big runs late in games like he's been known to throughout his entire career, this could very easily be a situation where the offense is just dragging down the team. The defense is doing all that it can, but ultimately there's only so much that the defense can take before it ends up wielding on its own. 5-11 is very much a possibility. 5-12 rather is very much a possibility for this team this year if all just goes to shit. But honestly, I don't think Mike Vrabel's going to let it all go to shit. I think he's going to have a team that is competitive in basically every game. I don't think they're going to get blown out once. And my prediction, even with that said, probably 7-10. 8-9 could be a good season as well. I could very easily see him doing that. The 9-win ceiling is an optimistic projection, though. I just don't think they've got a team. I don't think they got a team that can really make a run. Certainly not a run at the playoffs. I think they're going to need a lot of things to fall the right way for them if they're going to be competing for this division. 7-10 just feels like the spot for me. I just don't think this is that good of a team this year, even with the signing of DeAndre Hopkins that they had last week, or this past week rather. More than open to being proven wrong though, so we'll have to see how that goes. But for right now, the prediction is 7-10. Ooh, excuse me, for the Tennessee Titans. That coffee's coming back up on me, but no need to dwell on that now. Let's get to the next team on the list. I have got the Indianapolis Colts, and I think they stink less than last year, but they still kind of, they got a bad kind of shitty smell to them. They kind of stink in quite a few areas and have big questions in others. I'll put it to you that way. I think if we're comparing rosters right now, I don't think their roster looks entirely dissimilar to what the Titans have as far as overall quality is concerned. I just, we'll have to see how it goes there. I just, I feel like there's a very clear drop off after the Jags in this division talent wise. So we'll have to see. They did draft Anthony Richardson at 4 overall to play quarterback this year. He'll start right away. There's no one else on that roster that should be competing for the starting job as far as I'm concerned. Hired Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen, who, not like a lot of situations where an Indianapolis, not Indianapolis, but an Eagles offensive coordinator comes in where, okay, yeah, Nick Sirianni's an offensive coach. He's probably calling the plays, right? No, actually, Shane Steichen took over calling plays very early in the tenure of, oh my God, I literally just said his name. Eagles offensive, not offensive coordinator. He is offensive coordinator, but head coach Nick Sirianni over there. He took over for Nick Sirianni very early on in that tenure and coordinated one hell of an offense. I mean, really came on strong at the end of the first year he was there. The second season, we all saw what happened with Jalen Hurts, the jump he made, how with adding in A.J. Brown, how explosive that receiving core is. He's not going to have that type of receiving core this year, but what he will have is a top 5 running back in Jonathan Taylor and a quarterback that is an athletic freak. Very, very fast, very big, can be very physical when you need him to be in the running game. He can coordinate one hell of a running game, folks. He was, I don't know if he was the necessarily the architect, but he executed to perfection that stable of backs that the Philadelphia Eagles tried it out there, and they were a run-heavy offense over the last several years with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. I would expect some degree of that to be implemented with the Indianapolis Colts this year that really augment the run game and make it a formidable presence, formidable challenge that presents itself for the defense. I don't know if the roster is that great, but I think the strength of this running game could really take them farther than people expect this year. I don't think it'll result in a playoff berth, but you could see some very explosive stuff this year on offense, really just through the running game, this run game renaissance that's coming through in the NFL, kind of spearheaded by Shane Steichen when you think about what he did with the Philadelphia Eagles. If he does even a semblance of that with the Indianapolis Colts, this offense could be better than it was last year, which is not a high bar to clear given who was playing quarterback back there last year, but this offense could have some juice in the running game this year, and they just need Anthony Richardson to be serviceable in the passing game for this offense to be, a little bit above average, still probably middle of the pack, but a little bit above average. Will the defense be better than last season? Will Shaq Leonard stay healthy this time around? I simply don't know, because they looked so poor last season, and Shaq Leonard did not stay healthy, as I alluded to there. He had a back issue, which playing linebacker and really just doing any sort of athletic sport, a back issue could derail your entire career as far as explosivity is concerned. And he had some major multiple back procedures to alleviate what was going on there. There's no guarantee that Shaq Leonard steps in and is the same player that he was back when he was known as Darius before he had these injuries, which it's never a good sign when initially you think it's an ankle injury and it turns out to be a back. When you got extremities that are hurting that tells you your back is hurt, generally not a good thing. Like if your shoulder hurts and it ends up being because of a back sort of spinal issue, that is not good news, and there is no guarantee that you come back from that looking like you did before. I mean, Darius Leonard still the most accurate punch in all of football. I mean, absolute machine in creating forced fumbles. I think he'll still have that in the bag. Maybe he's not quite as explosively athletic as he was before that procedure, though. That's something that they're going to have to watch throughout this year. And not to mention, they traded their best cornerback to the Cowboys last year. Stephon Gilmore, still a very good corner in the league. They traded him out of town for basically a bag of balls. And another cornerback slash safety, Isaiah Rodgers, just failed the idiot test in maybe the most spectacular fashion that we have seen since these gambling suspensions started getting handed down. So there is absolutely... I mean, the front seven looks good. They still got DeForest Buckner up there. Questions at pass rusher. Will Kwity Paye step up in his second year with the team? Who's to say? There's questions up and down this defense, though, man. We haven't gotten to the specific personnel just yet, but there is ample reasons to question whether this team is going to be any better from the defensive side of the ball this year. I think their style of play could negate some deficiencies, but there is a definite ceiling on what this team could do this year, just based on the roster they have, quite frankly. Let's look at the personnel with that in mind, though. Starting off with the draft. They started off of course, with the draft, getting Anthony Richardson in the first round at quarterback. Who's to say what he does this year? I think they're going to put him in the best possible situation to ease him into the NFL life, though. This is not going to be like a Justin Fields stepping into Matt Nagy's offense, Matt Nagy asking him to do a whole bunch of things that are not his strengths right out of the gate. This is going to be Anthony Richardson stepping into an offense that caters to his running ability and makes the passing decisions a lot easier than what he would have in a regular sort of pass-heavy offense that he would otherwise be stepping into in a lot of cases. I don't know if Anthony Richardson's going to work out, but it seems like he has the work ethic, he has the personality traits. He just needs a situation to ease him in there. And you know what? That sounds a whole lot like a guy that Shane Steichen had with the Eagles and turned into a borderline MVP contender last season. I'll just put it to you that way. After the first round, the Colts drafted Julius Brents in the second round out of Kansas State. Worth noting that the hit rate on Big 12 defensive backs, not high over the years. Certainly not high at all, but obviously, a guy that's been, trial by fire his entire career, being in the Big 12 just based on the wide receivers and the offenses that come through there. They're going to be asking Julius Brents to step up right away, though, because like I said, Isaiah Rodgers, out of there forever. Stephon Gilmore, out of there, not forever from the league, just over in a different conference with the Cowboys now. So they're going to need Julius Brents to step up in a big way at cornerback. They draft Josh Downs in the third round at wide receiver. And this is a guy that if you did not follow North Carolina last year, first off, I understand. They weren't that great. They kind of fell short of some expectations last year. But Josh Downs was the entire receiving core out there. I mean, he is kind of a smaller sort of wide receiver, but plays bigger than his actual size right now. And he's the type of guy that I think can step in right away and play some big-time snaps for the Indianapolis Colts this year, maybe provide a little bit more of a downfield presence than what we've seen in previous years. Right now, we'll talk about the actual construction of the wide receiver core and just the receiving core in general coming up here, but it doesn't look drastically different from the sort of shorter mold, not shorter stature-wise, just shorter targets-wise, in terms of what they're looking for. A lot of possession receivers. Josh Downs provides a deep threat that they did not have over the previous years. I think he could be getting some good run this next season, kind of playing a role that Quez Watkins was playing with the Philadelphia Eagles, if we're sticking with that analogy. After that, they draft an offensive tackle in the fourth round. Storm and Mormon, Blake Freeland out of BYU. Then we're just getting into later rounds. They draft Will Mallory, another tight end to add to the room there. One of the faster tight ends in the entire draft this year. Had some good production in previous years at Miami. Probably cost himself some draft stock this last year playing in the Josh Gaddis offense, but that's a guy to watch in the fifth round. Also, they draft Evan Hull, a Northwestern running back, in the fifth round as well. So this could be a year where you see some young guys stepping in and playing pivotal roles, especially in a new coaching regime. Would not be surprised at that at all. They got a pretty good tight end room as well. So with that said, let's talk about the free agency as well after that. All right, so they pick up Samson Ebukam to further strengthen up that front line with the Colts there. They bring him in from that absolutely loaded front seven of the San Francisco 49ers. They do lose Bobby Okereke, kind of the odd man out there with Shaq Leonard coming back. Obviously, Zaire Franklin stepped up in such a big way last year, had an explosive, great season for the Colts, a bright spot in what was otherwise not a very good year last year. They lose him to the Giants this season. He'll be stepping in. Zaire Franklin will still be there. Bobby Okereke will be stepping in as a starter for the New York Giants, helping bolster that defense that we talked about last week. They lose Matt Gay in free agency. I don't know who else they brought in there. They bring in Matt Gay. Sorry about that. They bring in him from the Los Angeles Rams on a big-time deal. They lose Chase McLaughlin from last year's team, who goes down to the Tampa Bay Bucks, who we'll be talking about next week. They also bring in E.J. Speed. They retain E.J. Speed, rather, at linebacker. He'll be playing a pivotal role this year on the front seven. Lose Brendan Faison, another corner, to the Las Vegas Raiders. Retain Ashton Doolin, who's been around. Lose Paris Campbell. Taven Bryan they bring in from the Cleveland Browns. They bring in a good backup that Shane Steichen's familiar with Gardner Minshew. If, God forbid, Anthony Richardson does not play up to snuff or is not ready initially, I will say Gardner Minshew can step in there and be a nice little bridge quarterback, and I think he's going to make a lot of money throughout his career doing that. They lose free safety Rodney McLeod to the Cleveland Browns. They bring in Isaiah McKenzie from the Buffalo Bills, who, again, talking about that deep threat potential, he's a guy that can step in and maybe make an impact there. Brashad Perryman, whatever is left of his body is coming in there. Former Ravens first-round pick, bounced around a good bit. Spent last season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now he's going to the Indianapolis Colts to maybe play a role there in the receiving corps. They lose Matt Pryor, who maybe a loss, maybe not. They didn't have a very good offensive line last year. He was a guard, so he will probably be playing guard with San Francisco next season, where he'll probably earn himself some money because that running game is it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful, but I digress. Anyone else that I should look at? They lose punter Matt Haack, so they lose both their punter and their kicker in free agency. Matt Haack goes to the Arizona Cardinals. Guy just doesn't like winning, but he does love money, so you gotta respect that. And they also bring in Pharaoh Brown from the Cleveland Browns. Outside of that, those are pretty much your major moves this past offseason for the Indianapolis Colts. So let's look at the ending sort of depth chart here. Right now, Gardner Minshew is slated as the number one QB. Don't expect that to last for too long. That's just kind of, make the young guy earn it to some degree, but he's a 4th overall pick. Maybe you got Gardner Minshew in there to play kind of a bridge role while he's getting up to snuff with the passing side of things, but Anthony Richardson brings in an athletic factor at quarterback that makes Shane Steichen's offense complete, like we saw last year with what they were able to do. Gardner Minshew just does not bring that sort of aspect to the table, so I'd imagine sooner rather than later, whether it's to start the season or at some point throughout the season, they ease Anthony Richardson into the starting lineup. Gardner Minshew is a classic bridge QB right now and a solid backup quarterback when he is eventually put on the bench. So again, might be number one right now, but I don't see it staying that way. At running back, they got Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, and Deion Jackson. So basically, same group they had at the end of last season. I would expect Jonathan Taylor to take the majority of those snaps because, like I said, he is a top 5 running back in the league. He's a spectacular guy when he's got the ball in his hands with the good blocking in front of him. And, when a defense can't just load 8 in the box against him every single time with a quarterback that cannot run worth shit. He will not have that this year with Anthony Richardson in the lineup. I can almost guarantee you that. And now we get to the wide receivers. We got Michael Pittman returning as the number 1 guy, which kind of a lower-end number 1 receiver, but still a number 1 receiver nonetheless. Alec Pierce coming into his second year, big physical guy that can maybe stretch the field a little bit as well. Dealt with some injury issues last year. Kind of came on a little bit towards the end of the season, but a guy you're going to be expecting a whole lot from in his second year. He'll be stepping into that number 2 wide receiver role. And Josh Downs, who I just talked about, stepping in at number 3. They're going to be asking him to hit some deep sort of opportunities there. Same thing with Isaiah McKenzie coming in at number 4 right now. This is going to be a situation where you're going to be asking a lot of young guys to make some contributions that they have not made historically under Chris Ballard, drafting players in the past. So a lot of question marks there. You also got Jelani Woods at tight end, in addition to Will Mallory, Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, who I do not know who that is, but is slated as the number 2 tight end right now. Excuse me, just raw dogging my vocal cords right now with this, lack of coffee at the moment. But that's your receiving core. As far as ranking them in the division, with DeAndre Hopkins being added with the Tennessee Titans, I feel like the Colts actually have a worse receiving core than what the Tennessee Titans have right now, which is saying a whole lot, because I don't think the Tennessee Titans have a very good receiving core overall. But that's just that's what you've been getting historically with Chris Ballard. It's, solid at spots, but specific, like outside corner has not been the biggest strength of the team. Maybe that's not fair, but outside receiver certainly has not been the biggest strength under Chris Ballard thus far. Never really had a true number 1 wide receiver that could stretch the field under Chris Ballard. So maybe Michael Pittman can provide a little bit more in the way of that. Alec Pierce might be able to break through this year. Josh Downs, you're going to be asking him to contribute a lot, but right now I am far from sold on what the Colts are bringing back as far as receiver are concerned. Left tackle, they got Bernhard Raymond. Left guard, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly at center, Will Freeze at right guard, and Braden Smith at right tackle. Basically the same offensive line as last year, with the exception of Bernhard Raymond stepping in at that left tackle position, I want to say. Maybe they'll be put in some better situations this year with just the dynamics of the team and the offense they're going to be stepping into. Again, talked about this a couple times in this episode, but run blocking, easier than pass blocking, so that's going to put them in some good positions to succeed. As far as a whole offense is concerned, run heavy. I can almost guarantee this is going to be a run heavy offense, again, based on Shane Steichen's historical offense with the Philadelphia Eagles and just what the personnel is dictating. I think you're going to be asking the running game to create some opportunities for the passing game downfield this season. I think Michael Pittman can get you a lot of move the stick sort of catches, but you're going to need Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, and Isaiah McKenzie to stretch the field more than the Indianapolis Colts have in the past couple years. And you're just going to be asking Jelani Woods to be a big old jump ball guy in the red zone. That's, 6'8", giant tight end there. If he can step in and get a few big-time catches in the red zone, that's really all you're going to ask of him. But run-heavy offense is what I expect this year from the Indianapolis Colts. On the defensive side of the ball, like I said, Kwity Paye stepping into his second year, going to ask him to step up big time this year because they lose some players in the middle. I think they had Yannick Ngakoue in town last year, did not retain him. I think he is still a free agent at this point, but they do have DeForest Buckner. They got Grover Stewart stepping in at defensive tackle. Odeyingbo? Yeah, I totally destroyed that name, but he's not even going to be the starter. I think Samson Ebukam is the guy who's probably going to end up being a starter. This time it was just ESPN trying to torture me, quite frankly. But Samson Ebukam is probably going to be that fourth starter there. A lot of questions on the front. You're going to need some young guys to step up big time outside of DeForest Buckner, and I think Grover Stewart's been in the league for quite some time, but not the best front seven in the world. Behind them, front four in the world. Behind them, you got EJ Speed coming back on that one-year deal, and you got Zaire Franklin and Shaquille Leonard coming back as well. Will Shaq Leonard be what he was before the injury? I don't know, but he will cause some forced fumbles, and that's all you can really ask of him at this point. At left cornerback, you got Kenny Moore. Right cornerback, you got Julius Brent's newly minted second-round pick that's going to be stepping right into the starting lineup right away. And behind that, you got Darius Rush, Dallas Flowers, two guys I have never heard of in my entire life as your depth corners. Not a situation I envy right there. And then you got Julian Blackmon stepping in a free safety. Rodney Thompson, not Rodney McLeod, Rodney Thompson at strong safety. I just don't know how highly I think of this defense this year, man. they're going to need some young guys to step up in a big way if they want to be competing this year. They're going to need some guys to step up in a big way right now, especially in the secondary, because they lost a whole lot this offseason. Kenny Moore is, a solid number one corner right now. You don't have Stephon Gilmore in there anymore. You got a young guy stepping up in Julius Brents. I think you lose Rodney McLeod this offseason, which is a big loss. You lose Bobby Okereke, which is a big loss as well. This could very easily be a defense that performs just as badly as they did last year. Again, though, that offense being as run heavy and clock dominant as it seems to be shaping up to be could put them in some more favorable situations. But right now, they're going to need Shaq Leonard to be every bit as what he was before the back injury, and they're going to need the young guys in the front line to step up in a big way if they want to be a competing level defense this season. Rigoberto Sanchez, forgot about him. He's coming back in as the punter. He tore something last year that kept him out the entire league. I don't remember if it was an ACL or like an Achilles or something like that. But they got Rigoberto Sanchez coming back, their longtime punter, resuming that role as well. That's kind of why you let Matt Hawk go in free agency. Also, Matt Gay is place kicker, all that sort of good stuff. So, with that said, where do I see them ending up this year? Ceiling, I'd say still a 10-win ceiling for this team. I think if Anthony Richardson comes in there and plays to, he doesn't even really necessarily have to be a Pro Bowl level passing quarterback. He just has to be what we all know he is, explosive in the running game, big physical freak as far as being at the quarterback position, really more of a tight end build than a quarterback build right now. He steps into that. Jonathan Taylor has an easier job because he can, take some sort of attention away from him, run a little bit more read option there with Jonathan Taylor as well. I think Jonathan Taylor's going to have a big season as a result of that. If they can put their defense in some good situations, and as Shaq Leonard comes back, plays well, Kwity Paye steps up in his second season, very easily I could see this team competing for the division title. I don't know if they'll necessarily, again, a lot like the Titans, I don't think they'll win anything if they get to the playoffs, but I could see them pushing for playoffs. 10 wins, not out of the question this year. Floor, though, I think they'll be better than last year, but 6-11, very much in the cards here for them right now. I think if all goes badly, if all those things that I mentioned, Shaq Leonard doesn't look like he once was, Kwity Paye doesn't step up, the corners are a disaster this coming year, the offensive line every bit as bad as they were last year, if Anthony Richardson doesn't necessarily step up and play up to his level passing wise, still going to have a solid running game, still not going to be number one overall pick material, but they could very easily go 6-11 this year based on what I just laid out there. They're asking a lot of young guys this season, so it's going to be a big old question mark until we see what they do on the field. My prediction for them, though, this season, 8-9 feels like the number. I don't think they'll be quite pushing for that playoff spot like their ceiling would suggest. I don't think they're going to be bad this year, though. I think they're going to be right around 500, right around average. They're going to win a couple games. They're going to win a couple games that they were not expected to win, and they're going to lose a couple games that you probably would have expected them to win somewhere along the way. That's just kind of the way this thing goes, especially with an inconsistent passer and young QB in Anthony Richardson stepping in this year. So 8-9 feels like the number for the Colts this year. Promising future, but present. They got some work to do in the meantime. Chris Ballard probably has another year in that job, though. We'll see what happens there. With that said, though, let's get to the final team in the division right now, the Houston Texans. But you know what time it is. Time to go take a piss, folks. I told you, it's going to happen at some point in this episode. Happened twice, actually, so I'll be right back. All right, let's power through to the end here. We got the Texans, final team in the AFC South, and we're going to try to keep this thing under an hour 40. So let's get through these guys real quick. Sorry, Texans, that's just kind of when you're last place for so many years. I mean, what are you going to do, man? You're improved, but still not really competing for anything. With that said, the Texans, everyone's favorite laughingstock over the last several seasons right now. At the very least, you don't have God's favorite GM, Jack Easterby, a.k.a. Jesus' GM, if you will, running the team into the ground, crib walking like Jesus all the way into obscurity. That's not happening anymore. He doesn't have the owner's ear. He got forced out last season. So you do have football people making the decisions now, which is an upgrade. And to be fair, they are finally making non-tanking moves right now. I mean, they They hired a young, the hottest young head coaching prospect in the entire league, in D'Amico Ryans, also former Texans player, coming in there to kind of rekindle some old glory, kind of run things as well. And I like their new offensive coordinator hiring Bobby Slowick. He would. Not a guy that maybe a lot of people know about, but Bobby Slowick was the guy that was helping coordinate the passing game. You understand, like, the San Francisco 49ers had guys wide open all year last year, and they've had guys wide open for a long, long time. So, a lot of that is Kyle Shanahan, sure, but also Bobby Slowick, guy you got to give a little bit of credit for that as well last year, and he's a guy that basically D'Amico Ryans faced off against every single day last year in practice, really likes what he brings to the table, so he comes in as the offensive coordinator. I like that hire, not to mention they made a big splash in the top 5 of the draft, picking a quarterback at number 2, C.J. Stroud, then trading back up to number 3 to take a cornerstone pass rusher. You may remember the Big Brass Balls Award going to the Houston Texans this year for that move. They drafted Will Anderson at number 3 to be that cornerstone on the other side of the ball. So they may not have the overall depth and team construction to compete this year, but they are making some moves that indicate the tanking is over right now. Right now, we are trying to improve from here on out. We are not trying to actively lose anymore. We are trying to make pushes to improve this team and build towards a playoff contender here, which, if you're a Houston Texans fans, rejoice with all of the power in the world that you have garnered unto yourself, because life is good now. I will tell you right now. With that said, let's take a look at the personnel. Looking at their draft here, obviously, like I said, C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson at number 2 and 3, respectively, the cornerstones, hopefully in the future, of both your offense and your defense, respectively. Then in the second round, they pick up center Juice Scruggs from Penn State, a guy that'll probably step in right away and help out that offensive line. Then you take the most ironically named guy in the entire draft, Tank Dell, all 155 pounds of him, 165, but who's counting? Wide receiver out of Houston, had a very, very good career throughout his college career. Total misuse of words there, but we're just going to keep it moving. He's a guy that'll probably feature prominently in this receiver room, especially trading away Brandon Cooks this offseason as well over to the Dallas Cowboys, like we talked about last week. And then you're getting into players that maybe you don't know, like Dylan Horton out of TCU. Who hasn't heard of Horton? Here's a who out of TCU. I'll tell you what. I heard of him. You may not have heard of him, but who has not heard of Horton and his who's that he's listening to over at TCU? Defensive end there in the 4th round. Henry To'o out of Alabama, a guy that you probably know because that's a fun name. He'll be inside linebacker, 5th round pick for him. And oh yes, almost went through this entire thing without mentioning him, but 6th round pick, Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver. May not have been the most explosive guy, maybe not the fastest guy in the world in the 40 time, but a big-time producer over there with Iowa State. One of the best receivers in the Big 12 throughout his college career there with Iowa State. Don't be shocked if Xavier Hutchinson, old Cyclone over there, steps in, makes some noise in the wide receiver room with the Houston Texans. Very polished guy coming out of college. Could be a big-time contributor. Good value there for a 6th round pick. That's the draft, though. Let's look at the free agency. They were busy in free agency this year, were the Houston Texans. They lose Obo Okoronkwo to the Cleveland Browns. Big loss there. They bring in wide receiver Robert Woods from the Tennessee Titans. Who's to say if he has anything left in the tank? We're going to find out, though. Then you get to the defensive additions. This is where they really start making some splashes. They bring in Jimmy Ward from the San Francisco 49ers, coming over there to join D'Amico Ryans in his new locale with Houston. That's a big-time pickup at free safety. They bring in Sheldon Rankins, very good defensive tackle. Has been kind of a journeyman throughout his career. Spent last season with the New York Jets. This season he will be with the Houston Texans on a lucrative 1-year deal. They bring in Dalton Schultz from the Dallas Cowboys to bolster that receiving corps. Very good tight end, franchise-tagged tight end last year for the Dallas Cowboys. They bring in Andrew Beck at fullback, whom I have admittedly never heard of, but played for the Denver Broncos last year, so he is free from that sort of misery, jumping right into a different kind of misery. At least this one, you'll be taxed a lot less in the state of Texas. They bring in Case Keenum Coming back to Houston, where he played his college career, one of the more illustrious college careers that we've ever seen as far as accolades are concerned, and a little bit of a pro career, reuniting in Houston to play the backup QB. Was with the Buffalo Bills last year, with the Houston Texans this year on a 2-year deal. Tremont Smith, cornerback, left Houston, goes to Denver. They lose tight end Jordan Akins. They bring in Shaquille Griffin on a 1-year deal. Hassan Ridgeway, defensive tackle, coming over from the San Francisco 49ers. He will be with the Houston Texans on a 1-year deal. They bring in Mike Boone to bolster that backfield. Devin Singletary to bolster that backfield even more. Really kind of signaling what maybe this group is going to be looking to do throughout the course of the season, hiring a defensive head coach, bringing in a lot of running backs on the offensive side of the ball. I like where their head's at right now. They bring in Denzel Perryman, absolute tackling machine from that Las Vegas defense, to play in Houston. Noah Brown, they bring him in, third wide receiver last year with the Dallas Cowboys. Should slate in right in as the third receiver with the Houston Texans this year. Jake Martin, outside linebacker. He will be coming to Houston over from Denver this year. Rasheem Green, Corey Littleton coming over from the Carolina Panthers. Good situational pass rush there. Re-signed Tavir Thomas. Bring in Chase Winovich from the Cleveland Browns. Justin McCray, guard, losing him from Houston, going over to Carolina. Let me see what else they got. I'm not really sure. O.J. Howard, not really much of a loss there. Outside of that, yeah, that's pretty much it right there. That's your free agent period for the Houston Texans. Big spenders. Got a whole lot of guys in there that I just mentioned that you probably won't remember, but should be making good contributions throughout the course of this season. And with that draft, with that free agency period, what do they have on the depth chart? It is as follows. C.J. Stroud as the number 1 quarterback. Davis Mills slated the number 2 right now. That's interesting. We'll see if that works out going forward here. Dameon Pierce, Devin Singletary, Mike Boone are your top 3 out of the backfield. Very solid backfield there. A backfield that presents you with different sort of challenges either way you slice it. Dameon Pierce, big physical guy. Devin Singletary, kind of a shiftier guy out of the backfield. A guy that's going to be playing a little bit more role in the passing game than maybe necessarily the run game is concerned. Still very efficient in the run game when he did it with the Buffalo Bills last season. And Mike Boone, just a good rotational guy to have back there. Former Vikings, Skull Vikes. What's going on there, bub? In the receiving core, you have got, obviously, Nico Collins. Well, not obviously. He was there last year. He was their number 1 receiver last year. Will be the number 1 receiver once again this year. Nico Collins at the 1. Robert Woods the 2. John Mechie the 3rd. Forgot about him. Out all last year with, I believe it was lymphoma he had. Some sort of ACL injury in combo with sickness last year that kept him out of the lineup. He'll be coming back this year. Who's to say what happens? But he was a very, very explosive receiver in college with Alabama. They're going to be asking him to step up and play a pivotal role for them this year in the offense. Then Noah Brown, Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson's sneaky deep group of receivers. I totally butchered that, but we're an hour and a half into the podcast. What are you going to do? Sneaky deep group of receivers, kind of similar, reminiscent of what the Giants have, quite frankly. There's no one guy in that group that you can say, okay, that's a legitimate number 1 bona fide number 1 receiver in there, but a bunch of guys that I think can play very solid in roles you ask them to play in. I think maybe not quite as bad as they may appear on paper in Houston on the weapon side, I think. And of course you got Dalton Schultz, who I mentioned. Don't have a whole lot of depth behind Dalton Schultz. Probably going to be a few questions as to the blocking ability of that tight end room. But as far as receiving goes, Dalton Schultz should step in and be an upgrade from what they had last year in Jordan Akins. I think he'll play a pretty pivotal role as the kind of security blanket for C.J. Stroud as he kind of steps in to this offense and is asked to become the franchise guy quickly. Overall, I think they're of the groups of receivers in this division, I think they're right there with the Tennessee Titans right now. I think they're actually a little bit deeper than what the Tennessee Titans have. They just don't necessarily have the top end talent that I'll put it this way. I think Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins are better than every wide receiver on this roster for the Houston Texans right now. But as far as depth goes, they're as deep as anyone in this division. They might be deeper than just about anyone else outside of the Jacksonville Jaguars in this division. Not the greatest group of receivers, not a sexy group of names, but a group that I think is going to shock some people as far as their production this season goes. And Bobby Slowick is going to have a lot to do with that. CJ Stroud, what does that combo do this season in the rookie offensive coordinator, rookie quarterback season for him? There's a lot riding on that right now. As far as the offensive line goes, well, also they got Andrew Beckett, fullback, free agent that I just talked about. They signed, yada, yada, yada. Offensive line, franchise left tackle Laramie Tunsil, one of the best in the entire league. No concerns there. They got Kenyon Green coming back for another season. I believe he was there last year. Juice Scruggs stepping as the starting center. Signed, I think they traded actually for Shaq Mason this offseason as well. He'll step in at right guard and probably play a pivotal role for them. And they got right tackle Titus Howard. So overall, I think the offensive line should be improved from where it was last year. And I think the offense as a whole has nowhere to go but up, because Davis Mills was just god-awful last season after a shaky but solid first year. Just looked totally lost last year. I think C.J. Stroud will step in and be better than that this season. I think you'll have a better group of receivers to throw to and a solid offensive line to keep him upright. I don't think this is going to be even close to a top 10 unit, but it should be a solid little middle of the pack offense to go into this next season. Maybe they're lower middle, maybe they're towards the high middle, but middle of the pack seems like what I would expect from this Houston offense. I think they're going to have a very good running game, and I think they're going to have a passing game that is good in spurts throughout this season. On the defensive side of the ball, after all of those additions, they got Jerry Hughes, the ageless Jerry Hughes, rushing off the right side. Will Anderson rushing off the left side. They got Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins in the middle there as your front four. That's a formidable front four right there. I think if Will Anderson steps in and is that well-rounded prospect that I kind of expect him to be, stepping in right away, being productive, I think this could be a very good front four. Behind them, they got Christian Harris, middle linebacker, Christian Kirksey, and of course, Denzel Perryman, who they signed in free agency this year. Christian Kirksey's good. I don't know anything about Christian Harris, quite frankly. Two Christians in there. You got a whole lot of Jesus in that front seven, though, which can only help you. Denzel Perryman will be the tackling machine he's always been. I got no concern about him whatsoever in this defense, but a few questions there about Christian Harris. Christian Kirksey should be okay. We'll have to see how it all works out there. Corey Littleton is just waiting in the wings there if all does not go well with Christian Harris. But Corey Littleton, you're expecting him to be more of a pass rusher anyways, so that's probably more of what he's going to be doing. Outside of that, on the back end, you bring in Shaquille Griffin off the street. You got Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie returning for, I think, second or third season young, very explosive free safety back there over the last couple of years. And, of course, you got Derek Stingley returning for his second season. Hopefully he won't be as injured as his first season, and he can step up and be that number one cornerback he's expected to be coming out of college. Overall, you got a coordinator, a head coach like DeMeco Ryans. You got some solid sort of personnel there. Do I think they will be as good as the Tennessee Titans? I do not, but I do think they're going to slot in right behind the Tennessee Titans as far as the second best defense in this division. I think the Jags probably fall somewhere at 3, and then the Colts probably at last in 4th right now. But right now, I feel like as far as strengths of this team go, I think the defense is going to be the strength of the Houston Texans right now. I feel like with the way the coaching staff is made, obviously having DeMeco Ryans come in there as the defensive coordinator, he's obviously had an embarrassment of riches with the San Francisco 49ers over the last couple of years to work with as far as the personnel goes. He's had a stacked defense to work with over there for the longest now. But solid group of personnel there. Very good defensive play caller. I think their defense is going to be very good this upcoming season. Maybe not top 10 level, but top half of the league, I would venture to say, down there in Houston. It's a young unit, but it's a unit that I think could really get them a long ways if they play their cards right. As far as a ceiling for this team, I could very easily see them getting 8 wins. I mean, this is still an inherently flawed roster that is very young and under a new regime, so expectations should be tempered, but they've got some good pieces and play in a weak division like we've been talking about this entire episode. So I don't see them having a winning season, but less than 10 losses would be a promising start as far as I'm concerned. 8-9 feels like what you should be striving for at the top end this year if you are a Texans fan. The floor, still could be 5-12. I very easily could see the Texans being the Texans once again this year and being in position for another top draft pick next year. Kind of an arbitrary number at 5 wins, but it reflects my feeling that they will at the very least be better than last season. Like I said, this is a really young team, and there will be some growing pains. No question about it. There probably is going to be some tough times this season. If all fails, they could still be a 5-12 team, but still better than last year at the very least. But everyone else is looking right back at them right now. With the same sentiment of, this is going to be one of our easier games this year, so we might as well take advantage of that and pounce on them while we can. 5-12, not out of the question there. My prediction, though, 7-10. I like the coaching staff. I think the young players will flash their talent this season, but the Texans still need another offseason or two to really put together a playoff contender. They are done with tanking, though. I can assure you of that just based on the moves they've made this offseason. They have finished up the tanking portion of the rebuild. Now it is time to press forward towards the playoffs. They won't get there this year, but the closer they get, the better, especially with that young core they've had. And with that, a whole hour 45 into this thing, we are done. It is unqualified analysis. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, subscribe, share with somebody. Subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe wherever you're listening to it right now, whether that be Spotify, whether that be Apple, whether that be Amazon Music, all over the place it happens to be. Whether it's on YouTube, certainly subscribe there as well. Trying to grow all sorts of platforms there. If you want to contact the show, either shoot me a DM at Caleb Verzak on Twitter. Link will be in the description so you don't have to spell my fucked up Eastern Bloc name, or shoot me an email at unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. That's unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. And with that, we are, pretty much done for this episode. I'm just trying to find one thing I learned this week, and one thing I did learn this week. In the mid-20th century, cargo ships would keep cats on board to combat rodents. Many were such valued members of the crew that they were issued passports. They really had no legal purpose, but legitimately a passport document for a cat. I'll be damned if it's not funny to see a full official passport made out for a cat. Picture and all with the cat's name and age on there. That's just fantastic comedy right there. And with that, I will see y'all next week, or if you're keeping track, on my recording schedule later today when we talk about the NFC South. See you then.